sixth meeting. We're doing a good job. The museum has been here a long time. That is just tremendous if you think about it. So congratulations to everybody on attending your 136th.
This is my 52nd board meeting in a row.
Wow. Think about that, y'all.
You said
All right, so I'd like to call this 136th meeting to order. I'd like to welcome a few special guests. So DB Foley from the foundation, Cindy Marquez, who is our new lawyer. Cindy, would you like to say hello?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm a senior assistant attorney general, and I'm very excited to be y'all's attorney now.
All right, welcome. And DB, would you like to say something? So for those of you who don't know DB, she's at Roanoke College and is also a research associate at the museum. And I would like to welcome Dr. Kuhn and Marshall, who are not yet on the agenda. I just want to welcome you to your first meeting. So welcome to the museum and welcome to our board meeting. All right, so we have to get all voting done by 11 because we're going to lose our quorum at 11. So we're not going to rush through anything. But if, you know, at 10:40, there are a few things we haven't voted on, we'll probably put those first. But we're going to have an orderly, you know, relaxing meeting, but if we have to rush a little, we'll do it toward 11. So the first item is approval of the minutes from the 135th meeting. I love that. So did people have a chance to review the minutes from the 135th meeting? Does anybody have any edits to those minutes? Any questions? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion that we approve the minutes? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Okay, so chair's report, a couple of things. I'm going to start with the positive. We have a contractor for the Gene S. Adams Pavilion. And for those of you guys who've been working for the museum, with the museum for a while, it's been a while coming. You got a little interrupted by COVID and supply chain price hikes, but we have a contractor. Construction is going to start this year and it will hopefully be finished this year, maybe early 2024. We're going to root for this year. We have our first diverse intern at the museum, which I'm really excited about. Her name is Savannah Brown. She is from Roanoke College and she's an English major and she's going to be working on marketing, communication, and exhibit. So when Savannah gets here, please welcome her. We're going to have a presentation of Dr. Kuhn, and I'm not sure if she's going to include Marshall or not, but I'm sure she'll introduce Marshall. And then we're going to have a deep dive on the endowment. But before we talk about that, I just want to talk about attendance. You are all here, so I'm not talking to the right people. But we do have some folks that on the board that are not necessarily attending the meetings regularly. So I'm going to be making some phone calls. If you know anybody who's on the board who hasn't attended or hasn't been present lately, you would just mention to them that we struggled to have a quorum the past couple of meetings. I would certainly appreciate it if you would reach out to them. So with that, Dr. Kuhn, I think you have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I promise this isn't a long lecture. I just wanted to share some visuals along with things that I'm going to tell you. Introduce myself and Marco and the changes going on in the herpetology center. So hopefully everyone on Zoom can see this as well. So these are just some highlights from the VMNH's first herpetology lab that we have been working really hard on bringing up to speed with the rest of the collections here at the museum. And so I'm really excited to introduce this to you all and share a little bit about what's been going on with us. So we've been working really hard to focus on, oops, sorry about that. There we go. Yeah, so my name is Ariana Kuhn. I'm coming to you from the American Museum of Natural History, where I worked for a really long time on reptiles and amphibians, and I really, really love them. I'm going to speak this over so you guys can check out It's a really beautiful animal here. So I love reptiles and amphibians, and I love doing research on them. This is just some examples of the way I like to interact with snakes. Everything from getting to be on the Virginia news with this beautiful black rat snake to advertise our reptile fest. That was a first for me to be on TV. And probably a first for that snake to be on TV, but also getting to go outside and see these animals in the wild in my own backyard. This is the trail just behind the Virginia Museum of Natural History, where I found this black rat snake just this week. In addition to that, the main things the lab has been pushing to develop and build up and grow are first off our education and outreach program. So training and aspiring lifelong learners. This is really important to myself and Marco Boyd, who is the new biology technician working with the herpetology and mammalogy labs. And so everything from festivals to events to lectures to meeting with people one-on-one to show them our collection space is something that we've been spending a lot of time developing relationships and opportunities for. I think that snakes sometimes get a bad rep, but opportunities to learn more about these animals definitely helps people understand them and appreciate them more. In addition to our education and outreach programs, we are working on expanding the VMNH's professional network specifically for herpetology. And that means spending a lot of time going and giving seminars at places like JMU, Radford University. This is me at the Field Museum of Natural History, where I gave the Women's Armor Field Series seminar about my research. So here in Virginia, but also outside of Virginia, to make sure that that network is really strong and other researchers are aware of the resources that our collections can provide to their programs. So in addition to that, we also are working on growing our collections and increasing visibility. And what that means is getting things out there into global repositories so people know what we have and they know that they can use them in their research program. So this is Marshall right here in our herpetology collections, working with the specimen. So rehousing everything, bringing it up to absolute best standards for herpetological collections in our field of biology has been a really important thing. And also expanding our education and outreach specimens as well, which can be really important tools for highlighting the use of collections in modern research. And lastly, expanding our scientific research without walls. So that means that both overseas, regionally, and right here in Virginia, we are launching some really new and exciting field programs. So everything from working in Madagascar, I'll probably be going there again this November and December to engage in some new field collections work and research and training and workshops for people in Madagascar at universities, in addition to looking at things like new species right here in our own backyards in Virginia. And new opportunities to explore this salamander diversity that we have right here in Southwest Virginia. And so with that, that's really just some of the avenues with which we're expanding the herpetological collection to integrate with all the other awesome stuff that's happening here in the other departments at the VMNH. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm also happy to follow up on some of those questions later. People think of them later on.
To say we took a tour of Dr. King's lab right before this meeting as part of the research and collections committee. It's great, so I highly recommend it. There are some live animals if you're squeamish about snakes, but it's very cool.
Awesome. You all so much.
Ariana, can you just mention the foundation support?
Yes. So all of this work that we were able to make so much progress on and how successful to start up this first herpetology lab here at the VMNH could not have been possible without this very generous support and funds from the foundation board at the VMNH. And so that has been really helpful from everything from being able to equip ourselves to go out in the field and look for these new salamanders and engage in this field research to being able to make these visits to build my collaborative network with other researchers in my field. So I'm really grateful for that. And that is one of the reasons that this has been so incredibly successful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How does the little salamander breathe?
Through their skin. Yeah. Not having lungs creates a lot of extra space inside of you for cool other muscle attachments sometimes. That's why they're in moist kind of terrestrial habitats and also about this big.
I'll also point out that Ariana, of course, joins Dr. Ivanov and Means and Moncrief in the molecular lab. So that molecular lab is that we fixed up and kind of brought up to speed during COVID as one of our projects has seen increased use.
Your specialty is DNA, right?
Yeah, so I am a geneticist. That is my very strong background. And so I love that we already have a molecular lab in place here alongside all of our specimens. And Marshall and myself have worked really hard to begin the first herpetological frozen tissue collection at the VMNH. And so these tissues are going to be used by myself and other biologists to get DNA out of, to do all kinds of really cool research now and into the future. So I'm really happy about that as well.
Welcome to the museum.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just want to take a second to introduce Marshall. For anyone that hasn't met him, please go chat to him. He's awesome, and it has been absolutely one of the other reasons that this has been so successful. And I'm really happy to have him here working with me.
Welcome, Marshall. All right. So at every meeting, since I've been chair, we've had a staff introduction and then a deep dive. And I think our deep dive this time is meant to be on the VMNH Foundation's endowment, which I understand is getting close to $1 million, which is, I hope I didn't steal your thunder. But we're looking forward.
That's reason.
Don't tell me things ahead of time, then, Joe. The salamanders.
Oh, sorry about that. There they come again.
Yeah, so we just wanted to take a little time and just kind of highlight the endowment, the VMNH Foundation Endowment. So you probably heard about it, you probably heard about the growth and gifts and things like that. So, but taking a sort of historical perspective, first of all, our endowment is not the final sort of the total number is not maybe what you see at the university or a larger museum, but it's important to keep it in context and perspective. So we want to kind of show where we've come from, where we're at, where we want to be. So as you can see, and starting, fiscal year 2010 through about 14, that's where we were. It was a very limited endowment. Primarily, it was a gift from Pete Boisseau, who's an early trustee, who got a story related to that. But from there, we started out with a gift from Dr. Hoffman, of course, the Hoffman Endowment. And from there, we've gotten additional gifts. So the Pete Henneken Memorial Fund, various different estate gifts. So, but it's not just the gifts, it's been the growth as well. So the foundation works closely with Steeple Investments. It's actively managed. We're seeing really strong growth. So this number 834,689 is as of March 31st. As of April 30th, so just a month later, it's at 859. So we've been very happy with Steeple, with the management. It's open communication, so it's communication with the staff, with the board, and of course the investment firms. So regarding the Pete Henneken Fund, the early fund, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we needed to provide some support for Nancy's research. So we reached out to Mr. Boisseau and just, let him know we'd like to use some of the funds. It's what it's dedicated for. It's a research dedicated account. Just give him a heads up. And he'd forgotten he even gave a gift. So it was something he gave maybe a couple $1,000s in the late 80s. It's been well managed. It grew. And he was happy to have it used. Happy to hear that he had an endowment account. So where we're going from here, we want to continue obviously growth. One of the early goals of the foundation was to raise $5 million for the Make Lasting Impression campaign, which $4 million was for the exhibits here. The additional $1 million was to be for exhibit support and growth over time. So we're getting really close to the extra $1 million. We're getting close to 900,000. Probably calendar year 2024, whenever that might be, we want to celebrate that. So we're working with the foundation. How do we celebrate the $1 million mark? What do we want to accomplish? How do we get the message across that these things, these gifts over time matter and they change what we do? Because when we get to that point, it's going to provide interest every year for exhibit support that we don't have now that we will. So, it's as far as activities, we're actively getting the word out about us as a resource for people if they're looking at estate planning. We work with different estate planners, foundation itself, spreading the word. So it can be an insurance, it can be just a wide variety of things. We've got the mechanisms in place to accommodate this. So that's kind of a quick snapshot. Happy to answer any questions, Joe. I don't know if you want things as well.
Another question, is it conservatively invested such that the stock market tumbles is something that it will still be there? What are the investment principles for how it's invested?
Right, so it's we're sort of middle ground, but we have mechanisms in place to quickly move things to a more conservative, less risk. So I think we're in good shape as far as that goes. Some accounts are more focused than others. So our Pete Boy fund is definitely conservative. That's one, the research focused account that's not really meant to be grown long term. It's so I think with the daily contact that we have with Steeple, I think they're fully prepared to move things as needed as the market changes. And of course, keep an eye on potential shutdowns, things like that.
Right, I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah,
Maybe in a
happy-
follow-up meeting with the investment principles. I mean, if it's in 99% stocks, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
If it's in 99% bonds, that doesn't make sense
Right.
either. But I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Absolutely.
To make sure that we're,
We do have an investment policy, and the foundation board certainly keeps a close eye on things. And in fact, Gary Collins, our investment officer at Steeple, he's a former foundation board member. So and I think it was the last time he came to give a report, he asked us, now that we're approaching $1 million, should we go more, do we have a field to go more aggressive? And the foundation board said, no, not until we get to the first $1 million will we reconsider the current investment scheme. So that's their pleasure.
is that investment policy something you could share with us?
Yes. Okay.
Very good, thank you. I think that'd be a good follow-up for the next meeting. Okay, anybody else have questions about the foundation and that one? Okay, so we have a couple of items of business to take out. They will not be as exciting as the presentation and endowment. So first item of business is those on the phone, on the board, by policy, it's a state law, have to explain why you're not here. So we'll just go around the horn and hope I won't miss anybody. So Roberto, can you give us the reason why you're absent?
I am utilizing my statute allowed distance waiver.
60 miles plus. All
Yes,
right,
ma'am.
Carol.
Good morning, everyone. This is a COVID hangover thing. 3 years ago, I was tapped to give a keynote at the Early American Industrial Arts event that's happening at the Frontier Culture Museum, and it has been canceled consistently, but it's on today. So I couldn't get to Martinsville and make it back to Stanton in time.
Okay, and Melanie.
Good morning. I am leaving to take my son to a soccer tournament in Greensboro.
Okay, and Lauren.
I'm on call for work, so I can't travel more than about 20 minutes outside of the city of Roanoke.
This is the 60 miles by about 6 miles. We mapped it out, and I was like, oh, so.
All right. Next item of, thank you all, appreciate that. Sorry to have to delve into your personal business. There is a policy that was in your board packet. I don't know what number it is. It looks like this. At the top, it says policy. We need to discuss that if there's any discussion and vote on it and approve it. So this policy really is meant to formalize the relationship between the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab and the museum. It's not something we really thought we needed to do, but some things came up, and I think it's just better to have a formal policy in writing. So I don't know, Joe, if you would like to say, or Hayden would like to say anything more about that before we ask for discussion.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief overview, and I'll let Hayden jump in with any particular details he might like. But this is our first delving into a relationship like this, in that we have 3 staff now that are Army or Naval reservists, And as such, the work that they do at the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab and the work they do for the reserves go hand in hand. And because of that, you know, we are a state agency, so we want to ensure that there's no confusion about mission. In other words, when they're doing work for the Department of Defense, they're simultaneously doing work for the museum. So Hayden, I don't know if you want to give some details on that relationship.
Sure. I mean, a lot of this policy, as you'll read, I mean, talks about there's, I mean, it's always difficult when someone does something for the, you know, the reserves. It's so similar to what they do for the work. So a lot of the policy is actually ensuring that there's an appropriate separation between those two, but recognizing that, you know, these things go hand in hand, particularly when we're talking about, you know, it's a small world in things like archaeology. So we have to certainly clarify, you know, what role we're talking to somebody in, you know, when we're engaging with our professional networks in archaeology. Some people often get confused from the outside looking in that, oh, are you talking to me from, you know, with the Army hat on or VMNH hat on? And so this policy kind of codifies that division, but like Dr. Piper said, also, you know, recognizes that there are going to be some overlaps, and just we need to make sure that we have the appropriate policy in place in order to respect that. Now, the other thing that you'll read in there is just basic language on employing reservists with the military, which you'll see that one line that we're discussing in there about, you know, just because somebody's serving in the military as a reservist, they don't receive any type of special treatment in their civilian employment, that type of thing. There's no personnel action from your civilian employer that relates to your status as a, you know, military reservist. So that's federal law, and also it's codified in the Code of Virginia as well. So again, it's just kind of laying some policy for you know, the reservists that are employed by us now.
And I'll just also, it was very interesting kind of dive into our policies. We do see language in the founding documents of the museum that talk about protecting world natural and cultural heritage. And that really, I think, speaks to what the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab does. And so the questions that came up, you know, as Hayden alluded to, do come from the outside. You know, people wondering if we are doing work for the Department of Defense when we are state funded. And again, I think it spells out pretty clearly that a lot of the work that is done may be international or national in scope, but is part of what professional archaeologists do, just like Ariana doing work just like Ariana doing work in Madagascar. It's your money. Okay. Just like Ariana doing work in Madagascar, or our invertebrate team doing work in North Carolina, Tennessee, describing disability, for instance. So that's the purpose of the policy.
Does anybody have any questions about the policy? Any discussion? Okay, before we vote, I want to make you aware of two incredibly minor changes. In paragraph G, the second sentence did not have a period, added a period. In paragraph F, there's a sentence that reads, as such, VMNH will not take military service into account when they fire, discipline, et cetera. We changed the they to VMNH to make it clear who the they was. So with those two minor editorial changes, I think we can vote. Would somebody like to make a motion that we approve the policy?
I move to accept the policy as amended.
Thank you. Any second? Second. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, policy passed. Thank you all. Hopefully that will help museum and help the CHML and make everything clear. There's one more item for me before we move to the nominating committee report, which is exciting because there's stuff to talk about. The museum has always done an annual report. The strategy committee has met, and we're going to beef up that annual report and make it a little bit more dense, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more leave behindish for people when we visit. We will continue to put the thing on the website that has what budget information. That's just the sort of thing we have to do. That is not the annual report. And I believe we are planning to send a letter to the governor with the annual report that talks about board policy and board, what the board's priorities are. That will be circulated to all of us so we can review it and make sure we agree with what the board is saying to the governor. But we're not just going to send them the report. We're going to send them the report with a cover letter that says, hey, here's some things that are important. So I just wanted to provide that to you all. You will have a chance to look at that letter, to put input on that letter. So anybody have any questions about that? I think it'd be a real improvement on our process. Thank you.
Look at timing.
Yeah. Go ahead. So the timing is you're going to get something before the next meeting, before you'll have a chance to read it and then we'll put it up before.
The submission deadline for our state requirement is October.
It'll be a next meeting topic, but the plan is to get that to you in advance. We can provide it with. Okay, anything else from me? All right, so I think now we have a nominating committee report from Melanie.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. The nominating committee recommends the following trustees serve in board leadership capacities: Lisa Carter as chair, Mark Buss as vice chair, Cord Cothran's treasurer, Nathan Sanford as secretary, and Jennifer Burnett would continue to serve as the immediate past chair.
Anybody have questions about that change? Roberta will remain on the board, but Roberta will no longer be vice chair. Mark will be vice chair. That was Roberta's decision. We did not make that decision. Roberta. Okay. All right. Would somebody like to move that we approve the roster of officers as presented? So moved. Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Treasury report.
All right, well, I'm going off two sets of notes here. So y'all have the first Ryan helps me make some notes that are very easily readable. So I'm going to try to make this painless. So obviously the museum budget's on track through the third quarter. Our utilities increased somewhat due to the installation of the new roof on at Douglas. Revenue is extremely strong with record festival revenue already achieved through fiscal year 23, and that was even before the Reptile Festival was held in April. So doing very strong there. And then I wanted Ryan to speak a little bit. Said we got several research and education grants are in the process via VMNH Foundation, including several private and federal grants with CHML that equaled or was more than $597,000. So, Ryan, would you talk a little bit about that?
Of course, that's all Hayden. Hayden, I would just say that the foundation works closely with staff, curators, of course, to facilitate, manage, and help administer grants, providing a framework for things like NSF grants, IMLF. So having that framework and management of the grants itself. So we don't mess with the content. We're not about editing grants, but yeah, we provide that framework.
And then I know Ryan talked about the endowment earlier, so we don't need to go through that. And then last thing we really talked about was something for the Wi-Fi has been basically completed. So now all new hardware, software, enhanced security, everything. So that is done and complete. Well done.
It's such a huge difference, not only in the labs, but working in the collections. If you rely on internet for access to literature or databases or whatever, which I do, I usually get here a day or two early before the meeting so I can work and use the collections. And it was painful for several years. I came in Thursday and I just went right to work, and I was an hour in before I realized it's not painful anymore. It was what I was supposed to be doing. So thank you, Ryan, and thank you to the rest of you for doing a bang up job. I'm impressed with little things that make a big difference.
That would,
Yeah. Yes.
that was Ryan and Tim King.
Yeah.
Who coordinated all that.
Nice. Well,
That's it for the treasurer report.
I have a question. I'm sorry. It didn't come up in the executive committee. So, I noticed that the budget is great. I think we're doing really well, but I noticed that for federal funds, we have 200,000 budgeted and only 79,000 has come in. And I just was wondering what that's all about.
So I can speak to that, yeah. So that is pass-through dollars through the Smithsonian now. We thought it from the Department of Defense coming straight to us through efforts. We found out that that's not the case. Department of State, sorry. So this dollars coming from Hayden's projects, and that as being pass-through funds, that way throughout the Switch Foundation. So just clearly, it is, you see the 300% over and the restricted gift from foundation, just kind of a, not necessarily one block, but that's where the dollars are.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions about the profit and loss statement before we turn to the budget, the budget for the upcoming year? Okay. Budget.
And I believe also, everybody should have got it. It's 4C, which is the budget for 2024. I think we need to.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else has questions. Sorry, I read these things. So we have new employees, but I noticed the salary amount in the budget for the 2024 year is less than the salary amount for the budget amount in the 2023 year. And I don't quite understand how we can have new employees in a lower salary budget.
So with the turnover of employees, the more senior employees have experienced those 2, 3, 5% raises out of state. So we're bringing new employees in roughly 5 in the past 18 months with the base salary.
Okay.
So they come back in and that could be as much as 50% less than what that previous position was.
Okay. All right.
That was for that's assuming a 35-year senior employee.
Right. Okay. I get it. Okay. Anybody else have questions about the 2024 budget before we vote? We've got a vote to approve it. So now is your time. Questions?
yeah, I don't, do we approve it without an audit? Again, I got bring this question up before, do we accept it?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. When you say an audit, we get audited by the state every 2 to 3 years. That's primarily not looking at the numbers like a nonprofit audit from CPA would be, but it's more along the lines of policy. For instance, during the last audit, one of the things we changed was when I approved spending on a credit card, I have to actually date my signature. So that's the level of detail we're getting into. So that's one example. As far as the proposed budget going to DPB, Department of Planning and Budget and so forth, they look at it every day, not weekly, you know. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm just wondering what our function is. Is our function to audit and approve it, or is it our function just accept it?
You have all the right in the world to change. We're giving this to the board as a recommendation based upon revenue projections for the coming year, as well as what we learned about expenses in this current.
But historically, what I remember is we do take action to approve the budget.
Okay, with that clarification, any other discussion?
I guess the only thing I wanted to bring up is that the numbers seem very similar to the budget numbers or the actuals, except for on the revenue side. So it just, it seems pretty much part of the course.
You're talking about this current fiscal year.
Yeah, 24 versus 23.
Again, we go through a pretty heavy duty exercise in making budget projections and so forth, and they do tend to track pretty close. You know, there's a couple surprises year to year, you know, but otherwise we try to keep things, you know, very close to. I will say that when I first came to the museum, if you look at the current fiscal year's budget enacted in one of the 4 quarters, you will notice the museum had a habit of actually changing the left-hand column of budget if things were running over or under. And we were just like, well, no, wait, that's not the purpose. We're not going to learn from that. Yeah. So that was one of the best practices thing that the museum evolved into, was to do that. And it's been very helpful because it is a lesson for the next fiscal year.
I guess my overall thought is sort of no surprises. There's nothing, I don't see anything there that.
And it is a more conservative approach than let's say,
Rather have it than not.
you're not rolling the dice on that.
Yeah, and so this last fiscal year, we way overshot revenues, but that was because we're kind of coming still out of the pandemic operations and so forth. And Jonathan, it's disadvantageous for us to lowball things too much as far as the state's concerned. Yeah, so we want to make sure that they're realistic.
Good discussion. Anything else in the budget? Okay, anybody or would somebody like to move that we approve the budget? So moved. Anybody like to second that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Abstain? Anybody opposed? Okay, the budget is passed. So I want to go backwards a little because Carol has a comment in the meeting chat about the CMHO policy. I don't think you're saying you don't like the CHO policy. I think you just have a comment. So Carol, you have the floor.
Well, I was trying to raise my hand when you all were having the discussion and wasn't having any success with that. It's just that
Sorry.
I was looking at the policy, which is beautifully written and it focuses on logistics, but I would just say there is yet another reason to solidify this relationship. And that is, this is the future. This is where archaeology is going. Essentially, these kinds of relationships between established organizations and new endeavors, and realizing that this is a little bit different with the military being involved. But the fact of the matter is, CHML is giving us a model. And I think that is really something that is going to pay dividends. And I don't just mean bringing in money. I think it's going to bring cachet to the organization in years to come. It's a new way of doing things. And I just wanted to mention that. It's another reason to solidify the relationship.
Thank you, Carol. I'm sorry that we didn't notice that your hand was up. Okay, anything else on CHML? Okay, I think that concludes our voting items. So the one person that was helping us have a quorum, if he has to leave, we understand.
Get out.
Okay, leave now. All right, so I think the next item is the executive director's report.
Coming full circle to the endowment, and Brian will cover this in more detail during the advancement report, but we are initializing a new system for our foundation finances, our revenues, our box office. It will all be integrated. On top of that, it will be an opportunity for us to give people the chance to make recurring donations. So say you can put a $1 donation or a $1,000 donation per month on some credit card, and it will be recurring until they opt out. So it'll be very convenient for people. So we're starting a new program. You'll see this. It'll be emailed to you because we'll get to this, but we're going to meet virtually in August rather than in person. And as such, we're starting a new Discovery Champion program. So people may sign up, including board members, and we hope we get 100% participation. I'll participate as well. Starting in July at some point, we will be able to take, thanks, Steve. Thanks, guys. We'll be able to do that recurring donation, $1, $5, $20, whatever people are comfortable with. And that's Discovery Champion program will go specifically to growing the endowment. Why is that? I like to tell the story that, I came from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History in the year 2000 when I started. That was a $10 million budget. 70% of it came from the endowment. The museum started in 1920. And in the 1950s, the Board of Trustees got together and said, for long-term viability of this institution, we have to have a strong endowment. And they recognized right then and there, the executive director and the Board of Trustees realized that they had to start then, even though it wasn't going to benefit that generation of participants in museum management. And so we've already started that. We started that pretty strongly back in 2015. We have momentum. this Discovery Champion program will do that as well. So just want to make that known to everyone. So starting this summer, you will receive the Discovery Champion description. Okay, yeah, you have it in your packet receipt. So we'll email that out as a reminder. I got ahead of the game. I was like, guys, let's get them going. They're like, it's not ready. So that was my bad.
I was hoping we could get everybody signed up for this meeting, but we'll do that in August if people haven't done it yet.
Yes.
Even if you give $5 a month, that adds up, right? Like that way the full board is participating.
Yeah, it's a brand new era for this museum, talking about endowment. I mean, when I got here, they told me the endowment was $30,000. I said, no, not what the return on your investment is. What's the endowment? And they said $30,000. So we knew we had to change that. And I think we're following, we're paralleling that path that Cleveland Museum successfully did 70 years ago.
So Jeff, what's the audience? Who else will it go out to?
This will go out to our membership as well as our donation mailing list. So we have a pretty extensive, and how many mailings is that?
2,000 plus.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are lots of people who they fall into all the categories you can imagine. There are people who recently donated, people who donated in the past, or people who donated in the past recently, but just have not given the last couple of years. So we have specific mailings for all of those people.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so I just want to remind the board, and we're doing well, but believe it or not, we are 3 years into Museum Without Walls 2020-2025. You remember during the pandemic, we launched a strategic plan in great fanfare. Maybe not. I mean, it was just what it was, but we've done very well. I will tell you that we have a report on VMNH Waynesboro. We are much farther ahead than we ever thought on that. And if you look at the other points of main focus within our strategic plan, we've made great progress in all accounts. And so you're hearing bits about this during the committee report. So, but we do need to start thinking about for May 2025 what that next strategic plan looks like. And I know Roberto, as chair of strategic planning, has already had discussions with the committee about that. So we need to formalize what success looks like in the next 5 years in museum's history. Speaking of which, one of the points of effort, of course, is AAM reaccreditation. I haven't even had a chance to share with the staff yet. I just recently received my first communications from AAM. So that will, we will be submitting our reaccreditation package in late 2024, right, in time for reaccreditation in 2025. So I think we're in very good shape. The staff has been hard at work making sure all the necessary paperwork and whatnot, policies and so forth are up to date, and anything that needs review has been reviewed. So the AM accreditation committee will be chaired by Roberto. Thank you for doing that. I know you're already chairing strategic planning, but that's going to be an excellent combination. Sherry has agreed to join, representing the board, and from the foundation board, we have Dr. Phyllis Newville, who is a Virginia Tech staffer, but also has an appointment with the Science Museum of Western Virginia. So she'll bring an interesting perspective. And Jennifer Thomas of the foundation board, she is former president of the Virginia Association of Museums. So we have a really good team that will oversee the production of our reaccreditation package. Every board member will have the opportunity to review as deeply as they would what we submit before the end of 2024. Circling back to CHML, I also want to mention, and please, Hayden, if you want to discuss it, we did have a security discussion at the January board meeting. With the new internet system, CHML has its own, I'm not the guru in internet technology. They have their own node that they access and nobody else can access. It's all password protected. And they did a security audit, and Hayden, I don't know if you want to describe the results of that.
Sure. We, so our interest in this, of course, is to protect ourselves from the type of work we're doing. Of course, when we're looking at the impacts of conflict in a certain area on the cultural heritage of a given region, there's going to be people who are going to be upset by the results of that. And so we need to make sure that we're taking all the security precautions that we can. And so the big upgrade along with the comprehensive Wi-Fi upgrade here was also levels of security, so levels of encryption, kind of think of like a doctor's office grade level of security in terms of maintaining health records, medical records, and that kind of thing, placed on, some of the Wi-Fi portals in there, so that we're all protected. We also have the ability to monitor traffic coming, into the museum and going out, just so we can make sure there's, if there's a certain country out there that's trying to penetrate a network here, we'll be able to see that type of thing. And then, of course, things like VPNs and everything. So there's several layers of security, and we did do a kind of a commercial grade security audit on our, our systems with McAfee, and we were able to improve. We did it before the Wi-Fi upgrade and security upgrades, and then after, and it was a significant jump. So I will say that previously we were not up to standards, but now we have far exceeded those standards.
Any questions for Hayden? Thank you for pushing that, Lisa. I mean, I know you talked about outside actors and so forth with your work, so that really kind of lit a fire for us.
I was just thinking while you're talking, I don't know if it's ever helpful, but Dominion, and I'm sure some other folks, companies as well, has a pretty robust cybersecurity program, given that we provide electricity to the Pentagon and et cetera. And we work with a lot of the 3-letter agencies in DC to make sure that our system is pretty robust. So I don't know if it would help if any of our IT guru cybersecurity type people tried to break your system or something. I don't know, but if there's anything we could do to provide assistance, I'm sure we could do.
I would certainly be interested in talking to them and maybe hearing the recommendations. Given that something, we can do a quick kind of brief on how we operate and what we use, and they can help us make it even more robust.
Yeah, it might be worth it.
Thank you. A couple other points in terms of our operation. The Early Childhood Learning Center has been redubbed the Young Explorers Center. We're going to start using that terminology. We're getting pretty close to, we're ready to move the books. We are preparing an area over at Douglas Avenue. We're going to wait until we have envelope improved over there. That's going to be windows and doors using maintenance reserve funds in the next fiscal year. And so the books are all set to move. The staff have a plan to get them moved in one day and organized in such a way that they'll still be accessible. Ryan, of course, has the pipeline set to do an interagency transfer of the compactors. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about?
We're looking at grant opportunities, so we're going to put funding requests in the state, right?
October, yeah.
And so we're looking at outside funding as well, so grant opportunities, things like that. And if we can get, whether we get the funding from the state or not, it can be leverage, it can be a matching opportunity. But regardless, we're looking at funding.
What kind of funding are you looking at? Like, how much do you need?
John, what was the amount?
Instead of 750,000 previous, so roughly that's it. That's I don't know the exact number, believe, but I think that number will increase roughly 20% because there are inflation costs associated with that number. The original number we put in the previous ask was 450,000, so it's grown each time. And that includes education professionals to help run that early support center.
But it'll be a great asset to this museum. I think it will help with our long-term sustainability. We fully expect to have more family memberships as people find the benefit of having a safe and energetic place to bring their children on a regular basis. So, Christy, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, I know that's kind of a new avenue for us.
No, sure. So of course, working with the funding and things, we've already been looking at components to add and topics to include that tie in the science of the museum with fun, hands-on exploratory areas. And just like I mentioned, having a really diverse area for the early childhood age group and families. Just to have a spot to go.
Awesome. Okay. And my last major point is we have an opportunity here. I think I've reported on this in the past, but it's starting to come to fruition. Our local historical society is housed in the historic courthouse in Uptown. They have begun to move dirt in preparation. They have all the funding to put a new wing on the rear of that historic building, and that will be expanded exhibits for that organization. So we are working now to develop a contract with the Historical Society to do their exhibit design and installation. The reason is that the money that we earn doing this, first of all, we can do it more cheaply than an exhibit design firm. They'll spend 3-4 times the amount on that. But so it's beneficial for them. The benefit to us, of course, is that the revenues earned will then be reinvested into our permanent exhibits because they're going to be 20 years old very soon, right? And it's high time that we upgrade those. So Bethany's excited about that. You have not met Bethany Fisher yet. She's our new our museum experiences manager, which kind of broadens in a way more accurately the definition of that job description, but she'll be the one kind of spearheading it. We'll be doing the purchasing through the foundation as we get money transferred over from the Historical Society to the VMNH Foundation. And from there, we will have an all hands on deck period where we basically move a very extensive private collection of historical artifacts that are being donated to the Historical Society and set them up in an appropriate fashion. So the timing is perfect because Dinosaur Discoveries, our current special exhibit, is good through the rest of this year, and that will be followed up by Masters of the Night, which is going to primarily focus on bat biology, and that is also a rented exhibit, so we have to do a lot less work with them. So we'll manage schedules and workloads appropriately to ensure that we can do this, and this will be our mechanism to finally upgrade the exhibits and get rid of that volcano that never worked. So yeah, things. But anyway, yeah. So those are the kind of main points. You'll hear more, including more about points within our strategic plan. I will point out that as we do further exhibit upgrades here and at VMNH Waynesboro, our intention is to make everything that we do bilingual. So that's going to be an important goal that we move to, and I think that's smart. We're looking ahead. We do have, as I mentioned before, a growing Latino community locally and regionally for that matter. So we think that that will be a benefit overall. I'll just conclude by saying the staff have done an excellent job. Christy is rebuilding the education programs post-pandemic. I know you'll get a full report on that in the education committee report, but it's just heartening to see the steady increase from the public schools. We just had, I don't know how many kids total last week in the galleries. It was great. The private schools and the home schools have really done well. So she's done an incredible job. I can't wait for you all to meet Bethany Fisher. She comes to us from Tampa, and who she worked for, what's it called? Bush Gardens, yes. So she has some really good chops. I mean, she's an ace in terms of creativity and graphic design and so forth, to be a real asset to our exhibits program. So I'm not saying we're fully recovered from COVID, but we're very close. Tom?
We have a history of having an exhibits committee, which was kind of part of the, I think, the education and public programs. Really, we helpful to Bethany to re-energize that committee so that she
had a good time. Yeah, he's not her feet wet now. He's been here a few months. Yeah, so yeah, this would be a good time to reinvigorate that committee. So what we've done in the past, but I'm open to any model. We just basically had the education, public programs, and exhibits committee kind of meet together.
And maybe that's the way we start, and she gets invited to those meetings as well.
Yes.
And then we can see whether or not there's enough business that needs to be handled separately and roll out a separate committee once again.
I think she'd be excited about that. That's what I have.
I'll let Lisa know. I'll be willing to.
I was going to say, do we need to recruit people to attend those committees that are focused on exhibits in addition to Tom, who's already volunteered?
Well, let's make part of the education committee and start off with depending on how parents either.
I'd like to turn things over to Ryan for the advance report.
Yes, I have a question for you before we do that. So you brought up Douglas Avenue. There was a discussion in the research committee this morning about storage. And I know that we're using maintenance reserve funds to proceed very logically on Douglas Avenue. I just wonder if there's a need to speed that up based on storage or not. If that's something we can discuss. We can wait and discuss it at the end of the meeting, but since it came up now, I don't know. Anybody has any thoughts on that? Do we need to move faster?
As far as money goes, I'm on the gas as far as I can. So as
You're working on trying to get
as
money
quickly as
to move
possible.
faster. Okay.
Yeah, so it is going, you have to get the it's previous stage. And then so as the next stage comes along, you put in more through you have your prep money from your maintenance reserve fund, you move over to your account.
You're trying to get money faster through the maintenance reserve program. I was just asking if there's anything we should do outside of that to move faster.
Then it boils down to contractors, and the state does not have a system in place that provides for rapid. How long did it take from the time that we put the bids out to the point that we got a contract with the billion, for instance? Was it about 2 months?
Yes, 40 to 90, well, roughly 90 days, the whole process of 90 days.
That's once you have money, getting somebody to do something. I'm asking if we need to get money faster so we can do stuff faster. More money faster.
That is a decision that the board has to make. If we have access to the kind of funds that we need to do a pretty substantial maintenance reserve project, if that's where the board wants to invest that time and energy, we can do it.
I think it's something we should maybe discuss, maybe not this meeting, but at our next strategic retreat or whatever, especially if storage is becoming an issue here. So
Yeah, it's long been an issue. When this building opened in 2007, the curators estimated about a 10-year period of positive growth for storage became an issue, and this building is now, help me out, the math, 16 years old. It's 16 years old last March, 2 months ago, 16 years and 2 months. So yeah.
So let's just maybe put our thinking caps on about whether that's something that we want to prioritize, trying to find additional funds for outside of the maintenance reserve, because I guess it's going to take 4 or 5 years before that building is ready for first.
No. So let me just clarify. So what we're doing, it will take a chunk of next fiscal year to get the envelope done. I guarantee that. When that is completed, what we're going to do as a short-term solution while we do the next phase, which will be the HVAC, we're actually going to use window units. We're going to black out one of the upstairs rooms that Tim has already picked out. That will be properly cleaned and sanitized, blacked out, and we're going to put in window units to create a desirable storage situation for the books. That does not speak to paleontology and archaeology, which have real needs, right? So we're going to start that process, transition over to doing the HVAC probably fiscal year 25, 26, 24, something like that. Yeah, it'll be a couple of years for sure. Yeah, before we get all that done. What we can't do is jump the gun, but if we can get funds, if there is a way that we can get capital improvement project dollars. A lot of these foundations that we look at, they specifically say no bricks and mortar, but if we tie it into a building improvement to change the condition of the building, because for years now, it has simply been inexpensive, what am I trying to say, mass storage with no real consideration for environment. But if we change the mission of the building, that might be something that people listen to.
When you say change the mission of the building, what's the current mission?
It is basically rough storage. It was nothing.
Well, I understand that, but in terms of the improvements, what is the goal? What is the current stated goal?
Collections, appropriate environment for collection storage.
At one time, I thought there was some discussion about housing there for visiting researchers or students.
Yes. Yeah. I could have a discussion offline about that, but the opportunity exists still for Douglas Avenue should we want to do that, because we do have obviously plumbing over there and showers.
But that's not part of the current push.
That's not part of the current push. Maintenance reserve funds can only be used to bring a building back to its original form, not to improve anything.
So my thought is that if we look at these other possible goals for the building, then that would be an opportunity to seek funds from other organizations that would support those goals. supporting additional educational opportunities, like I said, for visiting interns or visiting researchers, that kind of thing. That's just one idea.
Yeah.
That comes to mind.
It could also be a revenue source, and we did come up with state real estate, and they would actually help us find other state agencies that need additional storage space, should we decide that that's appropriate.
It could almost be like a satellite field station,
Yeah.
where, we're not that far away for some excellent habitats, as Ariana's pointed out. And so you plug it that way, we're not that far away from Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
And other.
It deserves some additional brainstorming and thought and strategy. So let's figure out when we can do that, but I think sooner rather than later. Okay, sorry to interrupt the flow, but that's in the back of my mind. I think it's important. Okay, you were turning it over to Ryan for advancement.
All right, thanks. So you've got the advancement report, which I won't go through in detail, but I want to hit some high points on that.
Would you mind standing over here just so you're closer to the microphone?
Yeah. So want to hit some of the high points. We've talked about some already. Ford talked about down, but we've talked about that obviously. As far as overall visitation revenue, we're getting back to pre-pandemic levels. We're not quite there yet, but if you look at the chart on the first page of the report, it's through the third quarter, and we're right there as far as revenue, not quite there as far as visitation, but a steady rise, which is what we want to see. Obviously, we don't want to see the spikes and drops and things like that. So hopefully that continues. We're working toward that. For festival specifically, we are through, including Reptile Festival, for the fiscal year, we're 33% over our previous record, which is fiscal year 19. And then as far as visitation, 21% over 19 on the record. So that's great news. That's due to a lot of sort of background factors, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We talked about the new donor database / donor outreach system. That's going to provide integrated outreach through text, through email, mail, all these different things, but also some solid analytics that we can better track, who's giving, how often are they giving, demographics, things like that. So we're looking forward to, we're doing the training now. It is an extended rollout, but as of July 1st, we'll have everything operational. So what you'll get after that is a secure online, a secure email where you can provide a secure donation for whether it's recurring donation for endowment, membership, things like that. We're trying to get away from things like paper. We don't want to see credit card numbers on paper. We don't want to see things like that. So best practices, we want to exceed sort of the standards and things like that. We talked about endowment. As far as partnerships, we've got several in process, both in terms of grants, corporate partnerships, individual support across the board. So research and education exhibits, research working with curators on different grant opportunities, administration, education working with Chrissy. We've got several in process, received, and proposals out there. So things like the Thurman Charitable Foundation, different community foundation grants. We just received a grant in Waynesboro. It's through the Community Foundation of the Central Blue Ridge for $5,000 to expand our programming up there. So it's going to provide support for the Wayne Theater lecture series, but also general outreach for need-based education programs up there as well. So looking forward to that. As far as science festivals, I just want to talk about the support for that. So the Board of Trustees back in 2017, at the retreat at NCI, working with staff, identified festivals as a priority and an area for growth. So over the 6 years, working with the foundation board, staff, trustees, obviously, we raised over 110,000 through the foundation for just festival support. So that's allowed us to expand the number of festivals we offer, the types, the quality, making those investments in festivals, which of course tie back to science and education, why we exist, primarily science. So that's something to celebrate. I think that's a good example of collaboration between the trustees, the foundation staff. So this long-term sort of growth that we want to continue. So Evie, thanks to you and the foundation for that. Yeah, as far as upcoming events, we of course got Dyna Festival in July, Bones and Booze in October, and a lot in between. So you'll see a lot of things like, not really events, but things like our education guide. So we're working on that. That's going to be a printed copy again. It was kind of PDF for a while there during the pandemic. Also an updated experts in the field. So you may remember that publication that highlights the curators and the science overall that we do. It's a nice leave behind to have to sort of identify why we exist again and why what we do is important. And of course, the annual report, so that's already in process. Looking at different templates, looking at best practices, and so we've got a lot of opportunities to really make that something impactful. So Bethany is a key factor in a lot of that as well. Happy to answer any questions.
One of the things that jumped out at me in the advancement report was the difference in the amount of funds you can raise from the sort of events, festivals versus like grapes and grains or golf tournaments. And that they're more mission centric as well.
That's right. So we look at festivals as, first of all, they're related to mission, and if they're not, we shouldn't do them.
Right.
But they are fundraising opportunities. So with the number of people we bring in, the underserved audiences, the demographics that we reach, it's very attractive to funders, whether it's for grants and partnerships, things like that. So the festivals are important for mission, but they're also a great selling point for potential funders. And it's not chasing money because it's what we do. It's related to mission. I just want to add to, I left it out, the Museums for All program is going strong. So for fiscal year 23, July 1st through March 31st, we've had over 3,300 folks take advantage of that, participate in that. A lot of that is festivals, but it's also every day. We see people come in, families, folks of all ages, backgrounds, things like that. And that's, again, thanks to support from Hooker Furnishings and also part of Bank Trust, with underwritten part of that cost. We're taking those support, those gifts, and we're going to apply for some grants this summer to further match that. So hopefully we can double that again for Museums for All. And we're proud of that program. It's a national program that we take part in. We are a model for that. So with the success we've had, partnerships, the grants, things like that, the sort of national administrators are very kind of use us as an example of success. So
yeah, one of the great stats that go with that, if you look at Brian's distribution map of where people come from, it used to be, going back to say 2019, we just basically have the round numbers. A third of our participants, either in general visitation or festivals, came from Martinsville, Henry County, a third from other parts of Virginia, and a third from North Carolina and other states. The percentage of people who come to these festivals or general attendance is now close to, or maybe it's at 50%. So that number has grown dramatically, but that also coincides with increased visitation overall. So we're capturing so many more people who live within just a few miles of the museum and have never attended anything before, thanks to Museums for All.
Anything else? Oh,
Question?
yeah.
Just question and a request. In our family, we had a bunch of birthday Aprils, and I was actually trying to look on Facebook to see if I could do one of those fundraising things on Facebook for someone's birthday, but it doesn't seem as though the foundation was popping up as a registered entity to be able to do that. So I was hoping maybe somebody could look into that. I mean, every penny counts, right? That could be an easy way for friends, family, and whatnot to do a birthday fundraiser. Though it might not be millions, you never know. It's still extra free exposure and whatnot. So I don't know what's involved in that, but as a true nonprofit, I would think they would qualify, considering some of the other people I saw that were in there. So just a request that maybe they could look into that. That could be something we could institute as another way of generating some funds.
It's a really good idea, Roberta.
really good.
Yeah.
I wrote that down, Roberta. I'll follow up on that.
Anything else on the advanced report or for Joe and the executive director's report? Okay, all right, research and collections.
Okay. As always, I want to encourage everyone to read the report that was included in your board packets. These reports include a list of acquisitions for the previous quarter, as well as the curatorial staff's reports for the quarter. And these reports include their priorities, publications that are in works or in press or have appeared, as well as other academic and educational activities. Ariana joined us today and Marshall too, and they introduced themselves. And after our meeting was adjourned, Ariana took us over to her lab and gave us a cook's tour, which was very much appreciated. And I appreciate both your times on a Saturday. It's no small thing. I received a report that I neglected at our meeting, which was regards to the taxidermy collection. I noticed that I'm on the hook for that for the full board agenda. So I'm going to take the liberty of reading this report in full. It's short, just to let you know where we are. The museum has a large taxidermy collection stored in a variety of facilities. The best mounts are either on exhibit at the museum, part of a traveling or offsite exhibit, or stored at the Starling Avenue facility. I believe that's Douglas Avenue facility.
No, Starling.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have a bunch of stuff.
Okay, thanks for keeping me honest. Quit trying to ad lib here. Mounts of poorer quality, and that is faded, cracked, or otherwise damaged, have been stored at the Douglas Avenue facility. So things that are slightly less than or more are there and require cleaning, followed by retention, donation, or disposal. The outline below is a roadmap forward to managing this collection. So there are just a handful of points here. All mounts have been inventoried and their condition recorded. A staff-generated recommendation of retain, donate, or destroy is included. An approximate $5,000 investment in the mounts will be made, the source of which is to be determined. A room at Douglas Avenue facility will be strategically chosen, cleaned, and modified to create a climate-controlled area for long-term taxidermy storage. Any mounts currently at Douglas Avenue facility are to be retained or donated, will be cleaned and moved to this room. The current storage room at Douglas Avenue and all of its contents mounts will be disinfected from mold and cleaned. All mounts to be donated or destroyed will go through the museum's approved deaccession process. Mounts for donation will be made available via several listservs and other avenues of communication to find suitable home institutions. Mounts to be destroyed will be disposed of by the curatorial staff. And finally, in a separate effort not yet completed, there'll be an effort to obtain an estimate for any necessary arsenic detection and mitigation. And the reason for this is that arsenic has been used historically in older mounts for protecting them from damage by insect pests. So that's where we are on that topic. Any questions or comments about that?
A lot of progress.
Yes.
Good, great.
Yeah, because, you know, we visited there the last time we visited here, and for some of us, it was the first time that we've been over there, or the first time in a long time that we've been over there. And it's an amazing facility on many levels. I mean, I see it as great potential for expanding the museum's footprint, but it also is going to require some work because as the emphasis is focused on this building, and rightly so, things have sort of been just put on hold until you know, the staff and the funds become available to address these issues. So I really appreciate the staff's effort in making it go with this. I know this is sort of thrust on Nancy as we're all standing there looking at her. And believe me, I know how that goes, deer in the headlights. I didn't envy her at that moment, but she stepped up and did a great job. Another important issue that we discussed was the
on that issue. I understand from Joe that there are some things that after that process they found are valuable and they want to bring back to the museum. So I appreciate the hard work, but also I think it was a big giant success.
So. Good. Oh yeah, absolutely. The next two things I want to bring up, or next thing I want to bring up, is the reaccreditation process, which is key to the museum's future. And an essential component or essential components of this process are getting our documents in order. And these are policy documents. There's two policy documents that we are involved in directly as a board. And this is the collections policy, which was last reviewed by the Board of Trustees in 2013. And then we have a brand new policy document, which was regard to our live animal policy. The line between natural history museums and zoos has been blurred dramatically in the last 30 years. And specifically, museums now have live animals. And I'm not talking just about vertebrates, but invertebrates too. And so it's important that this museum have in place policies for dealing with the acquisition of live animals, the care for these live animals, how they're to be used, and then the disposal of these animals for any reason. When I say disposal, I don't necessarily mean dead, although that's included in that, but also animals that are no longer appropriate to have here for one reason or another. What happens to them and what are the reasons that go instead? So these are important documents, and the staff and members of the board, especially the Research and Collections Committee, have had an opportunity to look at the original document and make suggestions and corrections and additions. Many of these are regard to new positions within the museum that are handling these various responsibilities. And this has been vetted by the state's legal team to make sure that everyone's above board there. So now we have two relatively clean documents. And at my behest, I've asked that we review these one more time while we still have the opportunity. And so what's going to happen is that for those of you who don't already have these documents in hand, you can either contact me directly or probably better Ben, and he'll send you the current versions. These are Word documents, so you can make your comments on both policies directly and return them either to Ben, or let's flat out say, return them to Ben no later than Bastille Day, July 13th. And at that time, Dick, Nancy, and myself will reconcile everybody's comments, and we'll come up with a clean version that will be presented to the Research and Collections Committee for approval at the virtual August meeting. And at that point, we will recommend full approval by the board. This isn't one of those documents where staff has asked us to take a look at it. This is a document that has our name on it. It is approved by the board, and this is explicit in that document, not only for the functioning of the museum's activities in these regards, but also to the reaccreditation process. So it's really important. For those of you that are new to the board or would like a refresher course like me, this document, although it can be a tough slog at times, let's be honest, it's a policy document, but it goes into detail about how the museum operates, who's responsible for what, how things are handled, what happens to, how do things come into the museum, how are things accessioned into the museum collection, how do they go out, who makes these decisions and why. It's a very detailed, explicit document, and it's well worth looking at. And because all of our names are on it as a group, it really behooves all of us to take a look at it. So for those of you that are so inclined, please reach out to Ben to get the freshest version of this, so you're working with that. And I know that's what I'm dedicated myself to next weekend. I'm getting it over with before I get lost in summer activity. But July 13th is the drop dead date to get your comments back to Ben, and that will give Nancy and I an opportunity to reconcile those changes, and we make sure that staff has a final look to make sure that the formatting and everything else is just pristine. And then we'll bring it for approval to the entire board. And that is it for me. Thank you for indulging me on that time.
Anybody have any questions for Art?
2 points, please.
No?
Hey, Art, it might be helpful for those of us who aren't as fluent in all of this, if there's any areas in particular that we should take a deeper dive. So in other words, most of it might be pro forma, but if there's anything that needs to be explicitly looked at since the last update, any sections that, might require our thought and discussion, if those might be at least start on the marginalia or something, so that we can make sure we don't miss it. If there's anything in particular that we need to,
That's a good point. On the collections policy document, I think we're almost there. I think that staff has gone through it thoroughly. I think that several of us have already gone through it.
Okay.
The board to get it there. For those of you that enjoy proof editing, final copy to make sure the periods are all there and things are indented and there's consistency within the document, this is the time to do that. For the live animal policy, I think this is a great opportunity for people who may or may not know anything about it, because outside perspectives, I think, are important. If nothing else, it will educate the individual on how things operate, how we want to be operating, but also having outside perspectives to form this brand new document at the very beginning, I think is critical to its success.
Great, thanks. The only other in the back of my mind, I was wondering if our flypaper sticky Guatemalan artifacts finally found a home?
Yeah, so, good question, Roberto. Hayden has a, mechanism, for that. I'm not sure what the timetable is at this point. He's not in a rush, but he has been establishing a strong relationship with, Guatemala. In fact, CHML, has, done training in underwater archaeology, for their military. So he and Bill have been down there doing that. As they develop that relationship, it's Hayden's suggestion that he hand deliver the collection rather than trusting it in any other fashion. So we'll have all necessary paperwork, signatures from the Guatemala's end, and then he'll hand deliver them when he and Bill fly down at some point in the future. So yeah, we do finally have a realistic roadmap.
Great, thanks.
I have a question and a point. Since the last collections policy was written and, taking into consideration the review that it's been going through and the comments that have been made already, it has really come to my attention that particularly in Virginia, with the emergence of our 7 sovereign tribes now, who are essentially nations, that they're requesting consultation policies that be written into the guiding documents of universities as well as state agencies and so forth. And I'm wondering, I don't know how this will play into the reaccreditation process, but I think it would behoove VMNH to begin thinking about writing a consultation policy as part of the work. One of the things, for example, we just recently held it was called the Virginia Native Nations Higher Education Summit in Richmond. I organized it. We had 9 tribes present and we had 13 universities. And one of the topics that emerged very, very strongly in that discussion, so it was a listening session for the universities. Nobody was allowed to bring swag. Nobody was allowed to recruit. It was all about listening to the tribes and what they need. And a point that emerged many times was collections, and the issue that many of the tribes have no idea of the holdings of institutions, and there's been very little outreach to them regarding those holdings. So in thinking about how this would play into both collections as well as exhibits, and other programming, I would hope that the institution VMNH could begin to think about drafting a consultation policy.
Carol, I think it's a great idea, and I'll try to get something going on that we can report at the next committee meeting.
And Carol, if you happen to know of another institution that has already drafted one that we might begin to examine as a model, I'll also I'll ask Maddie Bassett to take a look around at some of the like William and Mary and UVA schools that they have strong associations with.
Neither really has a consultation policy. I can tell you we've been gathering information from around the state. And so when I say that this is relatively new, that's what I mean. This is something that has really just started to emerge, but there are many models from other states.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Good, good suggestion. All right, anything else on research and collections? Okay, I think Christy has been drafted to give Nathan's Education Public Programs Committee report. We gave her about 5 minutes there.
Thank you. Good morning. So this morning, the committee met as an informational meeting. So we just reviewed quarterly numbers, which is included in the board packet for your review also. And so we were discussing, and like was mentioned, the increase in programming coming from, pandemic level numbers. And so on the numbers, if you're looking at the quarterly numbers for the outreach and at the museum, which outreach meaning us going to a school or to a site. And then at the museum, the programming that we have here on site has drastically increased over the past several years. But you will notice that our distance learning or our virtual programming numbers have decreased just because of the switch in requests. So 2 years ago, it was all virtual programming, whereas now the option is still available for groups to connect virtually. We're still connecting. We just had one last month, but the request has drastically increased to more of the in-person. So we spent a little bit of time going over our numbers, and also Nathan wanted to mention, what Ryan has pointed out, the ongoing scholarship opportunities. So working on the grants that we can then turn around and provide scholarships. Our programming are fee-based. And so because we have a lot of groups that just do not have the funds available for programming, when we're available to offer scholarships to them, it's just a win-win situation for both. And so we have, like Ryan mentioned, some already in place for the next school year, as well as some that are in the works that we're waiting to hear from. And so those will focus on not only the Martinsville, Henry County surrounding areas that we serve from the main museum. We have our outreach educators in Charlottesville and the Eastern Shore area that the funding would be able to help with their programming as well. And so increasing programming in the Waynesboro area with our scholarship opportunities. Something else that we also touched on is one of the new areas in the museum is the microscopy lab. And so it is utilized across the board here at the museum with various departments. So there are research and collections curators and staff that have been utilizing it, interns working on some projects, and then the education department working with visiting school groups. And so we have just since it opened in end of December, we have worked with over 40 classes and served over 800 students in the microscopy lab, elementary all the way up high school students on various programming. And so looking forward to creating more programming involving the science that's being done here on site. And allowing the students the opportunity to work with microscopes. And so that is an IMLS grant program that we're working with. And so we're collecting data with all of our school groups that we work with on what level of familiarity are they with the scopes, what information have they gained from working with us here in the lab, and then future use with scopes. So we're collecting a lot of data to use with that grant report. So those were just a few highlights that we covered this morning. So thank you. Any questions?
I'll just point out that that's a real world skill, what they get in the microscopy lab. I was a graduate TA in microbiology, and I had to teach a laboratory. It was the worst experience of my life. I mean, I couldn't help but thinking I would love to just push the kid's head into the microfilm because they couldn't figure out how to look through with both eyes, and how to work with it while not looking at, you don't look at your hands while you're doing it. It is a real world skill.
It's not any better in college.
That's
my biology majors and non-majors. I spend a good hour walking them through just how to use a binocular dissecting microscope. So anything we can do at the front end, I'm for it.
All right, thank you, Christine. Tom, I think you have the facilities committee and then the Waynesboro advocacy committee reports.
I do. I guess we've already heard about the Gene S. Adams Education Pavilion. We have a contractor now. That's good. We have not actually met as a facilities committee since our last meeting, so I don't have any additional reports other than information that's already been shared through the packet. Regarding well, let me also back up just a minute. If you wanted to host a conversation about Douglas Avenue and how to maybe bring more funding to that. Perhaps that could be housed inside the facilities committee.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
And I'm willing to facilitate that. The Waynesboro Advocacy Committee, of course, there's a lot of stuff going on in Waynesboro. I'll spare your time and not cover everything, but we've been meeting monthly, and I represent on the board together with Mark and Carol, part of that committee. You'll recall that this is an ad hoc committee. It's not listed in our bylaws, and it's also composed of representatives from the foundation board, as well as a number of community members. And as you look at reassigning to committees, I would just point out that we've lost a couple of those committee members from the foundation and from the community. I think Joe has some recommendations. We've been talking about it a little bit. At some point, we'll suggest to you some names to add back to that committee to replace those vacancies. The detailed design and the work with the architects, largely that. A lot of that is going through the staff. We are doing a lot to try to share with the community what's happening. The science talks continue. I'll point out that those could be added to the advancement report as recent events. And we've wrapped up our season this year. So we finished with 3 talks since our last meeting. One having to do with microbiology of the watershed, which was kind of interesting. It was a retired faculty member. And then we did one on harmful algal blooms, which came out of a discussion with some of our audience members who were with the Friends of the Middle River. And it was kind of a combination of science and advocacy, so learning about what the science was behind it, and then advocating for reduction in algal blooms. And then finally on trout and some of the history of trout, brook trout in particular, and some of the genetics around that. So all of those are on YouTube if you want to visit those. And we're preparing for our next season. We've already got 3 talks lined up, including Mariana's coming to talk. We're having in September somebody talk about hawks, because the hawk watch is a big activity there, and that'll be good timing for that. And then in November, we have a geologist who's been working closely with us and has done a lot with the digital mapping project within it's now the Department of Energy, no longer Mining and Minerals. So anyway, those are our 3 that are currently lined up. We had a great turnout at Riverfest. Over 3,500 people showed up. We had a table there. We showed some of our advanced drawings and designs. Committee is watching the redistricting and some of the upcoming campaigns for November, because there's a lot of things happening. We'll see some change in leadership at the state level. We need to be proactive about how we get ourselves positioned in the upcoming biennium budget. We're looking forward to hosting the Board of Trustees in November in Stanton. So that'll be another opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the Waynesboro project. And hopefully, I think we're going to plan some opportunities to visit the site and that kind of thing. And I want to thank the staff for all their work that they've been doing on this project and coming up to Riverfest and putting that display up and spending so much time with the community. I think it's really reaping dividends. We do hold the public library office hours monthly, and we are hearing more and more people come and say, oh yes, I've heard about that project. Oh yes, that's a great project. And less of people saying, what's going on? I've heard that before. So I think it's paying dividends. And we did get good TV coverage for one of those office hours. So there's an article I think posted in the advance report.
I think so. After the last meeting, we had that little side meeting afterwards. You can see the energy in the community. At least for me, it was great. Sees the energy from other people in the community as well. So I'm really excited about getting involved in science talks and other pieces. So it's really on fire.
Yeah. That's all I have on the question.
Can I add to your report that whether we're attending Riverfest, office hours, or anything else we're doing up there, we do have a great mailing list of people interested in the project. So it's been growing quite nicely. I will also add that Jonathan and I are meeting with the secretary and of education and some other folks up in Richmond Monday. We've been Zooming with her and her team for these monthly management meetings, as they call them. But I think they're inviting, I don't know who, but they're inviting someone extra special to attend, so they requested that we come in person. So we'll be doing that. And my intent, right in our first line of our special projects list, is VMNH Queensboro. So we're going to be ensuring she was well briefed on that, as we do have the biennial budget coming up.
Good. Any questions for Tom about the facilities committee or the Waynesboro advocacy committee reports?
I hope that you will join me in congratulating Tom on his retirement.
Have more time to do museum work.
I am now a full-time museum volunteer.
Tom, how many students do you think you mentored over your time at JMU?
One time I thought I should go back and look at all my rosters. I didn't do it, but I think thousands, obviously. 27 years at game and training on state New York before that, but 30 years college.
Yeah, I get to figure out who you want to be now that you're all grown up.
Yeah.
Start by going fishing. Start by going fishing.
Oh, that's already happened.
All right, Roberto, I think you wrap things up with the strategic planning committee report.
Great. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Great. As you saw, I tried doing an update down to one page, but obviously there was all kinds of great content from staff that I wanted to be sure you all saw. We were trying to start to schedule our committee meeting, and in the process, we were taking to heart the feedback from the last general board meeting on what we were looking at and what we were rehashing versus what we needed to look at. So we were trying to take a jump in the years forward to really do strategic longer term and say, okay, what is the next step of all the things we're discussing? What's actually the next step that we need to get in line and also be aligned with the accreditation that's going to need to be done? So we requested staff and say, okay, what really do we need to focus on? What would be the most helpful thing in terms of the work that staff needs to do and the progress of the museum? So that you saw in the first section is reframing the committee's thoughts and conversation on jumping forward to the next strategic plan. And what does that look like? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to define it? So that you saw in the first section. So that was really the intent of our first conversation, looking at the points, looking at how that should look in preparation for a full committee meeting, so that once we jumped into the full committee meeting, we would have a substantive conversation rather than just brainstorming out in the wilderness. So we started looking at that. We also brought into the fact that, kind of like a marketplace analysis and SWOT in some business terms of who else is doing what, how is that being measured, how is that being looked at, so that we would be in line in case of budget talks and other such things, in line with the rest of the state, not only in what our mission is, but how we get funding to do that. And, just keeping in mind, point number 2 is keeping in mind that lots of times the reality of what consultants and strategists and whatnot do in past museum projects may have been a little bit optimistic. I think we have enough track record, even through COVID, that gives us tangible data that we can use for our extrapolations and longer term looking at how, the world should look in the 2025, 2027, 2028. So we are more than happy to take any feedback and input from the rest of the board as we try to tackle that down for our next meeting. The second and main area was sort of a continuation of a prior discussion on how we can leverage the data that we do have in our message to the world. The analogy I'll make is in the same fashion that we ask Joe annually to come up with a report of his accomplishments, so to speak. Our message or our statute required report is a similar thing. The state wants to know what we're up to. So that's in the past, we've done just a basic, financial spreadsheet kind of a thing. In terms of strategy, we thought this is an opportunity to make some comments to the legislature as well on the record and say, we've done this, we've done that, we've gone above and beyond 1, 2, 3, but also in the same fashion that we asked Joe what he needs to get the job done, it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we need a little more money, or, this thing isn't working fast enough when we're trying to get approvals, or whatever the case may be. And that's the feedback in what Lisa mentioned about the board input. This is our message. So that one document that goes to the state is kind of our message to the state saying, hey, this is what's up. The bigger annual report that's normally done by all kinds of cultural and museums and whatnot is more of a marketing piece and a fundraising piece and an awareness piece. It's kind of our, annual coming out party that says, hey, we did all these great things and here's some interesting stuff. And, the underlying message may be, hey, give us some money. So it's basically the same message and content. It's just slightly tweaked for the audience that we're trying to address. So we may be a little more formal and official in our state required document, but the annual report itself, as was mentioned, is a bit glossier, is a bit fancier. It's kind of telling the world, hey, this is all the great stuff we did this year. So in preparation for that, obviously it's in all the other factors, we just suggested it might be helpful to have a public timeline that everybody's aware of this, when people can get their thoughts in mind as we're going through our meetings on what's required when, so that the folks actually doing the wordsmithing can get the content they need. But my request would be to the board, what are the top 3 things we want to brag about, and what are the top 3 things we need a little help with? And then those can be wordsmithed into whatever messages we're sending to whatever people. Any questions?
Roberto, I'd like to go out on a little bit of a limb here. I think it's time to just plant the seed. This is nothing that we have the capacity to tackle soon, but and this did come up in our strategic discussions. The museum has met with success over the past decade, and I think we're getting to a point where we can realistically say we've outgrown our building. Right, we are prepping spaces on B side that were never meant to be offices, so we can put people there and so forth. More importantly, for Dinosaur Fest, we're going to have erected in the parking lot about 3,000 square feet of tent, right? Just to handle our festival public programming, so what's probably going to be the biggest festival we throw this year, right? And so I would just like the board to start thinking about this for the future. It can be part of the next strategic plan in some realistic capacity. But we are talking about, if we want to put a wing on this building, we would need the consultation of a professional architect to say what's realistic. If we did just in our not architecturally savvy viewpoint, we could see putting a wing on the building coming off the library wall out front where we have our banner and the flagpoles right now. And I would say we would need a minimum of 10,000 mission-centric square feet. So that would include, in addition to that, HVAC, access, other bits that take up more square footage. So maybe a 12, maybe a 15,000 square foot wing. So you're talking maybe in the order of $5 to $10 million. So it'd be a significant increase. But we're finding ourselves having to improvise more so than just rely upon the state-of-the-art building that was state-of-the-art 16 years ago. So I would just like to, from a strategic standpoint, I'd like the board to start thinking about that. So.
Well, I think we have 2 good topics for our next strategy. I'll cite the storage space. It probably should do it earlier in the facilities committee, but also that. I'm sure the other items will come up. Those are 2 good ones.
I think it'd be exciting for the community, and I hope it would be exciting for you all and exciting for the foundation board to get behind. another evolution in this institution akin to opening on Douglas Avenue, akin to opening this building,
Yeah.
and akin to VMNH Queensboro.
Yeah.
That
Anything
sounds
else?
like a, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Roberto.
No, I was just going to say that sounds like a good message to plant the seed in the foundation, as well as they're getting adept at fundraising and capital campaigns for Waynesboro. It's kind of like rounding the bases. They can keep in mind that the next step is going to be what you just said. So as they're finalizing and fine tuning the Waynesboro fundraising, they can put some placeholders for the next capital campaign for the facility expansion.
Do we have a meeting coming up or a plan where it's going to be strategy? Is that maybe a spring meeting? Do we have anything on the books?
You mean the strategic planning committee?
Yeah, no, I mean an offsite dedicated to strategy and bigger picture things, not just budget reports, et cetera.
No, but we can easily do that. In fact, we can make that part of the November meeting in Stanton.
Yeah, let's think about that.
Okay.
All right, I think that is the meeting unless there are other. Oh, of course. Charlie, do you know you're giving a good report? I do not. Okay. Would you like to give a report? Sure. So yesterday I retired.
No one's giving a report. So I would say that yesterday's meeting was very positive. I think that's the big take home message, that we were happy to see the numbers and money all going in the right direction, especially coming out of the pandemic. And there's a lot of energy behind some of the new festivals that are coming up, which makes me very happy. And overall, I think it's positive. Hopeful that the new people that are coming on to the foundation will bring new energy. We have quite a few that are new coming in. There are 4 of us that are coming off. And new blood is growing. So
Are there plans in place? I'm sure there are, to transition those new folks to make sure they get oriented.
so there is an orientation. Ryan's in charge of that.
June 13th.
Okay, good. So there's a plan. All right, thank you. Any other business? Yes, Art.
Just one last thing. I heard that tone. Want to quit? That would be me with the same tone if I were to refuse. Just a quick addendum with Marshall here, welcoming you to the museum family. I want to give a shout out to Joe for increasing the support staff for curators. This is huge. When I first started here on the board, there was very little support staff for curators, and now all of the curators have support staff, and this is a big deal. And I really do hope that as we inch along, every curator eventually will have a dedicated support person. Right now, we're sharing people, which is a small thing. That's a big help. So I just wanted to mention that. And thank you again, Joe, for making that happen.
The board made it loud and clear the importance, and I was happy to do that. Part of the reason I came here to this particular museum was the emphasis on collections. I was a curator. So I will also point out, while we're patting people on the back, when it comes to these budget requests, Jonathan's our number cruncher, but he's also a relationship builder with BPB and weekly, if not daily, periodically, conversations.
Yes, your name comes up a lot in discussions with curators about how did this happen?
But his ability to keep the home fires burning in Richmond, 150 miles away, has made these budget adjustments and requests, etc.
Thank you.
That's a really positive way to end, except unless there's anything else and there's no tone.
First of all, if you get travel for them to get reimbursed for mileage, if at all possible, please do that to me today. As the fiscal year wraps up, we're just trying to make sure our numbers are all in line. We can work with you if it isn't today, of course, but the sooner the better. Additionally, you have a collection disclosure statement in your packet at your table. Please fill this out. It's an important part of making sure that any personal questions owned by the board isn't interfered, isn't a conflict of interest with the work of the museum. And if you're attending virtually, I will email you a copy as well. I'll email a copy because that's didn't attend today. This is the part of our AAMD accreditation process to make sure all of our ducks are in a row with that. Additionally, if you do not have like a name badge or a physical ID, I am happy to work with you to get that. Or if you lost yours, I can also make that happen. Just let me know. I have these down.
Is there a digital version of this?
Yes, I can get that to you. And I can email a digital version to anyone else who wants one as well. Finally, one last thing, Bill asked me to bring up the possibility of in the future hosting trustees at an Airbnb offsite, we could do a hotel. Would you like to expand on that at all?
We have one within walking distance of the museum. We've worked it out with the foundation. We have a mechanism with which the foundation can pay for it rather than, we can't do Airbnb on the state side, but we can pay for it through the foundation. I reserve the right to edit some of these statistics, but I think it's something like a 13-bedroom house with 5 private baths, which I think would be adequate for our average size excursion here to Martinsville, and that everyone would have a private bath and obviously a private room. So the Hampton apparently has a much better situation than the flea bag we've been putting you in. We might be the names. All that said, if you would like to have an option like that, we would like to hear from you before we act. But I'll just leave it at, I'm gonna make you guys say no. If I hear nothing, I assume it's all good.
Is our next meeting the 12th or the 19th? If it's the 12th on my calendar.
The 19th.
Okay, when y'all sent around the meeting request, it was 12.
Darn.
So it's on my calendar, it's the 12.
Uh-oh, okay.
Yeah, so I scheduled something on the 19th, so
It's on our calendar as well.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It says the 19th on the activities.
it says the 19th here.
Oh, yeah.
It's 12 on the calendar.
Okay, it would normally be the 19th, it would be the third weekend, but if it's on the calendar as the 12th, then that's what we're planning for, because Mary Zell has made arrangements.
Okay.
I have it on my calendar as well as well.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, and I was like, oh gosh.
All right. Thank you for pointing that out, Alvin.
Okay, so it is the 12th. Okay, all right, good.
And virtual.
Yeah, that's, yeah, so, but on the 19th, I would not even be able to do virtual. Yeah, but that works, the 12th. Awesome.
Okay, is there anything else for the 136th meeting of the Board of Trustees? All right, well, I hope to see everybody here and more people at the electronic meeting of the 137th meeting of the board. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.